That Tuesday morning started out like any other. I had no idea a simple phone call could shatter everything I believed about family. Sitting in my office at the Carter Grand Hotel in downtown Boston, I picked up the phone and heard a cold voice claiming to be my brother's wedding planner. "Sorry, Emma, but the bride's family has decided to cancel your invitation. However, they'll be keeping the $65,000 you already paid." In that instant, a chill ran down my spine. I had to grip the chair just to keep from dropping the phone. $65,000, the money I thought of as my wedding gift to my brother, money I'd saved from months of running the hotel and my catering company. And in just a few seconds, it turned into pure humiliation. If you've ever sacrificed for someone you love, put your whole heart and trust in them, you know how deep that kind of betrayal cuts. It wasn't just about the money. I lost my place in what should have been one of the happiest days of our family's life. I remember standing frozen by the office window. Morning sunlight spilled across Boston streets, where people hurried by with coffee cups in hand. For them, it was just another ordinary day. For me, it felt like the ground had given way beneath my feet. They say family is the one place you can always count on. But that phone call made me wonder, if even my own brother could turn his back on me, then who was really standing by my side? This isn't just a story about a canceled wedding. It's a story about trust, betrayal, and the strength I had to find to protect my own worth. And I want to tell it all from the very beginning. Before the fancy buildings and city lights ever showed up in my life, Daniel and I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in South Boston. It was a place of old red brick houses crammed together, where winter winds off the Charles River slipped through every crack in the windows, and summers were so hot the fan ran all night but never cooled the room enough. Pothole-filled streets, playgrounds with rusty swings, all of it etched deep in my childhood memories. Daniel was 2 years older than me. To me, he wasn't just my brother, he was my reluctant protector. I can still see it. Every morning, when the school bus horn blared at the corner, Daniel would grab my hand and guide me across the busy intersections. He had this habit of pulling me close, like as long as he was shielding me, nothing could hurt me. The neighborhood kids used to tease me for being small, but the second Daniel showed up, they scattered. He never had to fight. Just one stern look, and his steady voice saying, "Don't mess with my sister." Our family dinners were simple stew, a loaf of bread, sometimes a cheap frozen pizza. But when I was 12 and Daniel was 14, everything changed. After months of fighting, our parents finally divorced. I still remember the slam of the door that night, a sound that split an already fragile home. My dad, a book-buried accountant, moved into a small apartment in Somerville with his new girlfriend. My mom struggled to find a job after spending her whole life as a homemaker. After that, the house grew colder. Mom and Dad only spoke through notes passed by us. "Tell your dad the payment's late. Tell your mom I'll pick you up early Sunday." Daniel and I had to learn to be the adults long before our time. When Mom couldn't afford groceries, we broke open the piggy bank and counted every coin. Some nights, we sat on the bedroom floor, laying out quarters and dollar bills, trying to figure out if it was enough for milk, eggs, and pasta to last the week. By 16, I was working night shifts at a little diner on Dorchester Avenue. My clothes smelled like frying oil, my hair too, but I didn't care. Daniel worked stocking shelves at the local supermarket, his overnight shifts dragging until sunrise. We pooled our tiny paychecks to help Mom. There was a night when I was so exhausted I wanted to quit. Daniel looked at me and said, "It's just us, Emma. I'll always take care of you, but you've got to be strong too. There's no one else." That simple line became our unspoken vow. Even in hard times, we carved out moments of joy. In the summer, Daniel would pedal me on his old bike all the way to Revere Beach. We'd eat popsicles, let the ocean wind tangle our hair, and dream of better days. He talked about building skyscrapers one day, and I dreamed of owning a little inn with a lavender garden. We didn't know if those dreams would ever come true, but those talks gave us hope. When I chose hotel management, Daniel was my biggest cheerleader. He even sent part of his paycheck every month so I could buy textbooks. I remember him handing me a crumpled envelope with just a few 20s inside, grinning as he said, "It's not much, but at least you can buy your book this week." I cried that night, not out of pity, but because I realized how lucky I was to have a brother willing to sacrifice everything. Our teenage years may have been poor in things, but they were rich in connection. That invisible bond made me believe that no matter where life took us, Daniel would always be by my side. I never imagined that years later, that very bond would be tested in the harshest way at a wedding that was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. My road to success wasn't lined with roses. After high school, I went on to study hotel management at a small college in Massachusetts. I didn't have a big scholarship or any real help from family. Most of the tuition came from my part-time job at the front desk of a little boutique hotel in downtown Boston. At first, all I did was check guests in, answer phones, and clean when we were short-staffed. But that place taught me patience, people skills, and most of all, it gave me the belief that I truly belonged in this field. Every time I called home, Daniel would ask, "Are you getting enough sleep? Do you need me to send a little more money?" I knew he was working himself to the bone on construction sites, yet every month he stuffed part of his paycheck into an envelope for me. Those bills, still dusty from the job site, became my motivation to keep pushing forward. After a few years, my hard work started to pay off. I got promoted to supervisor, then assistant manager. By the time I turned 27, I was director of operations at one of Boston's most prestigious hotels. But my ambition didn't stop there. I wanted something of my own, a place that wasn't just a hotel, but a symbol of willpower and family. So I took the risk. I borrowed money, emptied my savings, and bought a historic hotel on the edge of bankruptcy downtown. The building, the Carter Grand, had gorgeous high ceilings and marble columns, but inside, everything was falling apart. My friends called me crazy, but I saw potential. And so did Daniel. He didn't just encourage me, he rolled up his sleeves. As a construction supervisor, he called in favors from friends in the trade, getting the cheapest rates possible. On weekends, he led crews to replace wood floors, paint walls, even rewire the place. When I worried the budget was running out, Daniel just grinned and said, "Think of it as an investment for both of us. One day, we'll sit here, look out at a packed lobby, and know we pulled off a miracle." 2 years later, the Carter Grand reopened. That night, under the glow of crystal chandeliers, Daniel and I stood on the steps watching guests stream inside. His eyes shined. He wasn't one for fancy words, but I knew he was proud. From that success, I expanded, opening 4 more hotels in major U.S. cities, plus launching a high-end catering company for weddings and corporate events. Carter Grand Elite Catering became a name whispered among Boston's elite. But what I remember most isn't the awards or the big contracts. It's Daniel driving 3 hours in the middle of a freezing night to help fix a burst pipe. It's him sitting quietly beside me all night when I panicked over a failing first contract. He once told me, "You can be the brains, I'll be the hands. We'll make it because we've got each other." As success came, our parents reappeared in their own way. Dad invited us to fancy dinners, bragging to friends as if he'd built our achievements. Mom sometimes tried to compare her little victories with ours. But deep down, I knew the truth. This success wasn't theirs. It belonged to the 2 kids who once sat on the floor, counting pennies just to buy milk and pasta. By 30, I owned 5 hotels and a thriving catering company. But more important than that, I believed nothing could ever shake the bond between me and Daniel. We had survived poverty. We had survived a broken home. I naively thought nothing in this world could come between us. What I didn't know was that the real test was still waiting, and it came in the form of a woman named Veronica Blake. Veronica Blake stepped into Daniel's life on a summer afternoon at a fundraising event on a Boston country club golf course. I was there as a sponsor. My catering company handled the lunch. In her flawless white dress, and with that smug little smile, Veronica seemed fully aware that every eye in the room was on her. She was the daughter of Margaret Blake, a woman known for her sharp tongue among Boston's elite, and Howard Blake, owner of a luxury car dealership chain. With money and status stacked on their side, The Blakes had always moved through society like their own private empire. Daniel met Veronica at the makeshift bar under a white tent. I saw the way his eyes lit up while she talked, the way she brushed his arm now, and then like it was a claim. When he introduced me, Veronica glanced my way and said with a half smile, half sneer, "Oh, your sister runs a hotel. How interesting. I thought you came from a real estate family." It sounded harmless on the surface, but I felt the sting of condescension. In the weeks that followed, Daniel seemed to change. He traded in his old pickup truck for a shiny new SUV. Our usual pizza and beer nights in his tiny apartment turned into dinners at fancy Italian restaurants, where even the waiters spoke to us with a wary politeness. Veronica pulled him into her world: private clubs, cocktail parties, friends in tailored suits, handshakes heavy with calculation. For the first time, I heard my brother talk about the right kind of people and the right places. The same Daniel who once believed family was enough now spoke about building an image and getting into the right circle. I sat there listening, but inside I felt a growing distance. The more I was around Veronica and her mother Margaret, the clearer their disdain became. At Daniel's birthday dinner, candles flickering across the table, Margaret turned to me with a stiff smile. "The Carter Grand, it's a nice hotel. But you know, success like that isn't so rare anymore. In America, anyone can make it if they get lucky." I sipped my wine, trying to stay calm. Daniel just gave a weak smile, not a single word in my defense. And Veronica? She didn't hold back. Working in hospitality must be exhausting. Listening to complaints, cleaning up messy rooms, I can't even imagine. She shrugged, her eyes sliding over me like I was staff. But what cut deepest wasn't their insults, it was Daniel's reaction. He didn't defend me like he used to. Instead, he said almost apologetically, "Emma's always been hardworking. But one day she'll sell the hotel, once she settles down." That line was a knife to the heart. He knew how much my career meant to me, how much blood and sweat I'd poured into it. Yet in front of them, he downplayed it just to save face. I left that night with an ache I couldn't shake. I told myself maybe Daniel was just trying to fit in, maybe he was caught up in a passing phase. I wanted to believe the brother, who once promised to protect me, was still in there somewhere. But deep down I knew it. A storm was coming, and it was about to sweep away everything we'd ever held on to. One late autumn evening, Daniel called me, his voice bursting with excitement. I had just wrapped up a meeting with my hotel management team when the phone rang. On the other end, he shouted, "She said yes, Emma." Veronica said yes to my proposal. I couldn't help but smile, forgetting all the uneasy moments before. Even with doubts still lingering inside me, I wanted nothing more than to see my brother happy. I started asking a million questions about how he proposed. Daniel proudly described it: a private beach in the Hamptons, rose petals scattered across the sand, a string quartet playing, and a 4-carat diamond ring. As he spoke, I swallowed hard. The brother, who once counted every penny when buying groceries, was now spending like a millionaire. But instead of questioning him, I whispered, "If your little sister can help make that day even better, just tell me how." Not long after, the issue of the wedding venue came up. Veronica and her mother, Margaret, pulled out lists of luxury hotels most already booked or way beyond Daniel's budget. I heard the worry in his voice, and that's when I made the offer. Why not the Carter Grand? The ballroom fits 300 guests, the garden's perfect for a June ceremony, and I can give you a special rate. At first, Daniel hesitated. I knew why Veronica was obsessed with high society standards. But then he sighed. "I'll talk to her." 3 days later, Veronica came to tour the Carter Grand. I personally led the walkthrough, with my hotel manager presenting the premium package. Veronica and Margaret stepped into the ballroom, their eyes scanning every corner like critics. After hearing the details, Margaret finally said, "Not bad. But these colors are completely wrong for the concept. Can you reupholster all the chairs and replace every curtain?" I froze. Over 200 brand new chair covers and imported drapes? That wasn't a request, it was a power move. Daniel looked at me with pleading eyes, just like when we were kids, and he begged me to give up a toy to keep the peace. I took a deep breath, forcing a smile. Why don't you show me your Pinterest board? Maybe we can find a creative solution without tearing out the entire design. Veronica gave a cool nod, like she'd just scored another point in some unspoken game. As the talks went on, the costs kept climbing. Even with my discount, the wedding estimate hit over $100,000. Daniel's face turned pale. I looked at him, then made a decision I'd later feel both proud of and regretful for. Let me cover the deposit. $65,000. Think of it as my wedding gift. Daniel's eyes widened. Emma, that's too much. I can't, but Veronica cut in smoothly. We really appreciate it. It'll make it so much easier to make the day perfect. Her tone carried the ease of someone used to taking big gifts without a second thought. I knew that money was equal to months of profit for my business. But I told myself sibling love was worth more. Maybe if I showed good faith, the Blake family would finally see me differently. That hope shattered quickly. Within weeks, I realized I was completely cut out of every decision. Veronica hired her own wedding planner, who met with my catering team behind my back. Emails about ballroom changes went out without my name on the list. When I asked Daniel, he just mumbled, "Veronica wants to avoid a conflict of interest." I swallowed my hurt, telling myself this was his day, not mine. But deep inside, warning bells were going off. I had given money, effort, and trust. And I couldn't help but wonder, was it all really worth it? 3 months before the wedding, I still hadn't received an invitation. At first, I thought maybe the mail was slow. But one afternoon, when I called Daniel to ask, he brushed it off. "Veronica's handling the list. Your invite's probably on the way." I hung up, trying to push back the unease creeping in. The next week, my cousin called, giggling. "Daniel and Veronica's invitations are gorgeous, Emma." Embossed paper, Veronica even signed each one by hand. "Thanks for letting them have it at the Carter Grand. It makes the invites look so classy." My stomach dropped. My cousin had her invite, and me, the groom's sister, had nothing. The signs kept piling up. I found out the bridal shower had already happened. I hadn't been invited. Instagram was full of photos of Veronica beaming with her bridesmaids, while I was left out like some outsider. A week later, I stopped by to check the ballroom progress and happened to see the seating chart lying on an event manager's desk. My eyes scanned the page, searching for my name. Row after row, table after table. Nothing. I asked, "You must be mistaken. I'm Emma Carter, the groom's sister." The staffer looked at me with pity. "I'm sorry, Miss Carter. Ms. Blake reviewed this list several times. Your name, it's not on it." That night, I drove home in silence. Boston streetlights flickered past the windows while my chest grew heavier with every mile. My mind went back to those childhood nights when Daniel and I sat on the floor counting pennies just to buy milk. And now, after giving $65,000 for his wedding, I didn't even have a seat at the reception. The worst blow came from a phone call I never expected. A close friend of mine who worked at the country club called, her voice full of anger. "Emma, you need to know this." I overheard Veronica laughing with her bridesmaids. She said, "That hotel girl thinks she's sitting at the family table. What a joke. But let's keep her happy till after the wedding. Her money's already spent anyway." I gripped the phone, my hand shaking. Hotel girl. To them, all my work, all my success, all the blood and sweat I'd poured into my career boiled down to just that. 2 words. I thought that money would earn me respect, but instead it made me the punchline of their joke. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, staring at myself under the dim, yellow light. I saw a 34-year-old woman who had built a hotel empire, yet was cut out of her own brother's biggest day. I pressed my hand to my chest, forcing myself to breathe. And one question echoed louder than all the rest. Am I losing my brother forever? One Tuesday afternoon, I was in a budget meeting with the Carter Grand management team. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, falling across the long wooden table stacked with thick folders. My phone rang. An unknown number. I hesitated a second, then picked up, feeling like it had something to do with the wedding. "Hello, is this Emma Carter?" A professional female voice asked. Yes, this is she. I'm Victoria Hayes, the wedding planner for Daniel Carter and Veronica Blake. I'm calling about the $65,000 deposit you paid. My grip tightened on the phone. Is there a problem with the payment? I signed the paperwork myself. A short pause. Then Victoria exhaled, sounding careful. No, the payment was processed. But the Blake family asked me to let you know that your invitation to the wedding has been canceled. The room tilted. I clutched the chair, so I wouldn't collapse. I'm sorry, what did you say? They decided to adjust the guest list. They'll keep the venue and the catering. But your presence is no longer required. My heart hammered. Which family? Who made that decision? Ms. Blake and her mother. And according to them, Daniel agreed as well. I felt my breath catch. Daniel, the one who used to say, "We only had each other," had quietly agreed to cut me out of the wedding I was funding. Can you tell me why? I asked, my voice shaking. Victoria hesitated, then spoke like she was reading a script. They're worried your presence might create a sensitive situation. Some guests might mistake you for staff rather than family, since you own the hotel and the catering company. They don't want the atmosphere affected. Every word felt like a knife. My whole career, everything I'd built, had become an excuse to remove me from my brother's day. I asked quietly, and the $65,000 I paid? Under the contract, the deposit is non-refundable. The Blake family insists it should be treated as a gift from you. Shock flipped into rage. I looked around the room, my colleagues waiting for me to get back to the meeting, unaware that my world had just broken. I drew in a slow breath, my voice oddly calm. Ms. Hayes, tell Veronica and her family this. If by 5 p.m. today I don't receive a formal apology and a restored invitation, I will cancel the entire event. I own the Carter Grand, and the contract allows me to terminate if the client violates core values of respect. On the other end, Victoria choked on her words. Ms. Carter, this has never happened before. Then today will be the first time. I cut her off and hung up. I put the phone down and felt my heart pounding, shaking, but fiercely determined. I'd had enough. And if Daniel really chose to stand with them instead of me, he was going to face the consequences. That afternoon, at exactly 4:55, the glass doors of the Carter Grand slammed shut. From my office window, I saw Daniel walk in with Veronica, her parents, and mine. The tension was so thick the front desk staff stepped back, avoiding Margaret Blake's furious glare. I had my assistant lead the group into a private meeting room. A space usually reserved for million-dollar contracts had now become the stage for a family betrayal. I walked in, keeping my back straight, one hand pressed against my chest to hide the trembling. The moment the door closed, Daniel snapped. Emma, what the hell are you doing? Why are you threatening to cancel my wedding? I looked him straight in the eye. I'm not threatening, Daniel. I'm exercising my right. I put up $65,000 and got cut out of your wedding. I'm not staying quiet about that. Veronica burst into tears, clutching her mother's hand. She's ruining my dream, Mom. We've planned this for a whole year. Margaret lunged forward, her voice sharp as a blade. Ms. Carter, this is our family matter. You have no right to interfere. I gave her a cold smile. I'm sorry, Mrs. Blake. This is my hotel, my contract. And more than that, I'm the groom's only sister. I do have rights, and I have limits. My father, who rarely spoke up, asked softly, Daniel, is it true? Did you agree to cut your sister out? The room fell silent. Daniel lowered his head, avoiding everyone's eyes. I turned to him, my voice breaking but firm. You once said all we needed was each other. What now, Daniel? Am I just some extra names scratched off the guest list? Howard Blake, Veronica's father, stepped forward, face flushed. This is ridiculous. We have a binding contract. If you cancel this wedding, we'll sue. I pulled a photocopy from my folder and slammed it on the table. Clause 12. The Carter Grand has the right to cancel if a client violates ethical standards or risks our reputation. Taking my money and then erasing me from the wedding? That's fraud. And worse, it's shameful. Margaret sneered. You're just stirring drama for attention. My daughter doesn't need you to make this wedding perfect." And then, to my shock, my mother stood up. Her voice shook, but her words were steady. "Enough. Emma is my daughter. Daniel's sister. Cutting her out of this wedding is disgraceful. I won't sit here and pretend it's okay." Daniel finally lifted his head, his eyes wavering. For a brief second, I saw the brother I grew up with. But Veronica gripped his hand tight, whispering, "You have to choose, Daniel. It's me or her." I drew in a deep breath and met his gaze. "You don't have to choose between us. I've already chosen for you. Either I'm invited as family, with respect, or there is no wedding here." The room sank into heavy silence. Then Daniel let out a long sigh, his shoulders slumping. "I want you there, Emma. I was wrong. I just caved under the pressure. I'm sorry." Veronica spun on him, eyes blazing. "Are you insane? After everything, you're still siding with her?" Daniel's voice hardened as he faced her. "She's not just her. She's my sister. And without Emma, there wouldn't be a wedding, a hotel, or a reception to even talk about." I forgot that. I kept my voice steady. "I'll allow the wedding to go forward, under 3 conditions: a formal apology, respect throughout the event, and clear acknowledgement that the $65,000 was my gift, not some hidden discount." Howard clenched his jaw, then gave a reluctant nod. "We don't have a choice." I looked around the room, my parents uneasy, Margaret seething, Veronica crumbling in tears. But for the first time in months, I had stood up for myself. And this time, Daniel was forced to choose. The wedding day arrived on a bright June morning. Boston was drenched in sunlight, the sky a clear blue without a single cloud, like nature itself was blessing the couple. The Carter Grand was dazzling, white roses lining the aisle, crystal chandeliers glowing above, a string quartet playing familiar classics. Everything screamed luxury, exactly the way Veronica had always dreamed. I wore a simple navy dress, seated in the front row with family. As I walked into the ballroom, I felt the eyes of the guests on me. Some whispered, "That's the groom's sister, the hotel owner." Others looked at me strangely, like they weren't sure I even belonged there. I took a deep breath and held my head high. Daniel stood on the altar, sharp in a black tux, but I could see the stiffness in his shoulders, the tightness in his face. When the music swelled, Veronica appeared, glowing in her crystal-studded silk gown. Guests gasped, cameras flashed nonstop. Margaret followed behind, her expression triumphant. The ceremony unfolded as planned. The priest read the vows. The guests sat in solemn silence. Then came that familiar moment. "If anyone objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace." A beat of silence. I held my breath. And then, Daniel turned his head, his eyes locking onto mine. In that look, I didn't see the stranger he had become these past months. I saw the brother who once shielded me on a dusty playground. He drew in a deep breath, his voice ringing out clear. "I have something to say." The entire ballroom erupted in whispers. Veronica snapped her head toward him, her smile frozen. The priest stammered, "Daniel?" Daniel lifted his chin, his voice steady. "I can't go through with this. Not like this. Not when I've lost myself just to please others. And definitely not when my sister, the one who's always stood by me, was cut out of this day." Gasps spread across the room. Veronica froze, her bouquet slipping from her hands. "What are you doing?" she screamed, her voice breaking. Daniel turned to her slowly. "Veronica, you're beautiful, you're smart. But I don't belong in the world you and your mother demand. I changed my car, my friends, even the way I spoke. And in the process, I almost lost the most important person in my life, my sister. If I marry you today, it means I'm agreeing to spend the rest of my life as someone I'm not." Margaret shot to her feet, shouting, "Daniel, stop this nonsense right now. You're humiliating my daughter in front of hundreds of guests." But Daniel shook his head, stronger than ever. "Real honor doesn't come from how people look at you. It comes from living true to your values. And today, I choose the truth." He pulled off the ring and placed it in Veronica's hand. "I'm sorry, but this wedding can't happen." Chaos erupted. Some guests stood and stormed out. Others whispered furiously. Veronica's cries echoed through the ballroom. Margaret lunged at Daniel, trying to drag him away, while Howard sat frozen, his face dark with realization. Daniel stepped down from the altar and walked straight to me. He grabbed my hand and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me."
"I'm sorry."
I squeezed his hand tight, my throat too choked to answer. I didn't need words. All that mattered was that my brother had come back to me. Behind us, Veronica collapsed into her mother's arms, her sobs mixing with angry threats of lawsuits. But none of it reached me. All I heard was the pounding of my own heart, and in that moment, I knew our lives had just taken a brand new turn. When Daniel took my hand and led me out of the ballroom, chaos exploded behind us. Chairs scraped, guests gasped, Veronica's sobs cut through the noise. But through it all, our footsteps echoed steady across the marble floor, like we'd just broken free from an invisible cage. In my office, Daniel collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. I poured him a glass of water and set it down. He looked up, eyes red. "Emma, I can't believe I just did that." But when the priest asked that question, all I could see were the memories of our childhood. Those nights we scraped by together. I couldn't say I do, knowing I was betraying myself and you. I held his hand and said softly, "You just did the bravest thing of your life. You chose the truth, even when it hurt." In the days that followed, the news spread like wildfire. Boston's high society buzzed. The $1 million wedding called off at the altar. Some called Daniel reckless. Others admired his courage. My company got flooded with calls not to cancel, but to praise the way I handled the situation and protected my dignity. One planner even said, "Everyone knows how impossible the Blakes are. You stood your ground, and that's what earned you respect." Of course, there were consequences. The Blakes demanded Daniel repay their expenses. He agreed, working extra hours on job sites to cover the debt. Veronica's friends spread nasty rumors, but Daniel's true friends stayed close. And most importantly, I got my brother back. A month later, over brunch at our favorite spot, Daniel looked lighter than I'd seen him in years. He told me he was seeing Sarah, a city planner he'd worked with. Unlike Veronica, Sarah chatted easily with everyone, from construction workers to waitstaff. In Daniel's eyes, I saw a piece I hadn't seen in so long. As for Veronica, 6 months later, I got a message from reception. "Ms. Blake is here to see you." Surprised, I said yes. She walked in, no longer the proud bride in her glittering gown, but a woman in a simple sweater, hair tied back. She sat down, hands clasped, voice shaking. "Emma, I came to apologize. Not through a lawyer, but for me. I was wrong to look down on you, to take your money, to push you out of that day. I lost Daniel. And only then did I realize I was losing myself too." She pulled an envelope from her bag. Inside was a check for $65,000. This should have been returned long ago. I don't deserve to keep it. I looked at her for a long moment. The arrogance in her eyes was gone, replaced by exhaustion and sincerity. I nodded, took the check, but more than that, I saw her finally facing her mistakes. From that experience, I created the True Values grant, using that money to help everyday couples have meaningful weddings without crushing debt. I wanted to turn my pain into someone else's joy, to prove real worth isn't in luxury banquets, but in genuine love. A year later, Daniel and Sarah had a small wedding in the garden of my newest hotel. No hundreds of guests, no brand new chandeliers. Just close friends, family, and the golden light of a summer evening. When Daniel asked me to stand beside him as his best woman, tears filled my eyes. This time, there were no power games. Just love and truth. As I straightened his tie, Daniel whispered, "Emma, thank you for saving me from the biggest mistake of my life. I almost lost myself, and I almost lost you. But you never gave up on me." I answered, my voice trembling but steady. That's what real family does, Daniel. Not family for status. Family for love. For respect. That day, when he slipped the ring onto Sarah's finger, I saw his eyes shine the same way they did when we were kids when he held my hand to cross busy streets. And I knew, at last, we had found what mattered most: ourselves and each other.